Hi, I'm Kit Bell. Have you ever had to step away from your art for a while and then found it difficult to pick up where you left off? This was the last mixed media piece I did, and that was 5 months ago. My life has been filled with teaching, traveling, and printing botanicals, which are only available at this time of the year. And getting going after that long a break is daunting. Where do I start? Somehow it's easier to keep creating prints than it is to get started using them. In this video, I'll share with you how I got over the hump and regained my momentum. So when you're trying to get back into the flow of creating and, maybe a little bit stuck like I am, I find a good starting point is simply to organize the tissues. When I came back from Manitoba, I had all of these tissues. There's probably over 100, possibly more in here. I haven't counted. And they were just all thrown in together as I printed them. But that's not the way I use them. I use strong positives, like these guys here, as center of interest or focal point, something that's going to pull together an image, something that's going to be in the foreground. So I need those together so that I can pick the best tissues for a particular piece. The next little stash is the weaker positives. So these would be like second prints, ghost prints. And some of these could be very, very interesting to have to show depth in the background. They would be the second layer, something that's underneath the one in the foreground. So I put those together in a little pile. And by the way, I label these strong positive, light positive, so that I can quickly find them when I want. Now these ones are the really strong negatives. They're the first ones off the plate. Once you've inked it up, put your material on the plate, take the first print. It's usually pretty dark. Sometimes it got a little blurry. And these ones, I might not use these in their entirety, but I could take a piece out of one and use it as a shape to reinforce a composition, or perhaps a circle. I like circles. And some of the patterns in them are quite interesting. These I also use occasionally to make stencils out of, and I have a video, I'll post it in the description below, which shows you how to do that and how to do it on your computer and cut it on your Cricut cutter, if you should have those sorts of things. So these are the strong positives, these are the strong negatives. So I'll put them together in a pile, a little bit more neatly than that. And then these are the light negatives. And these ones I find have a lot of potential in them. Again, probably not to cover the entire piece, but perhaps to pull a circle out of. So I'll put these together in a pile. These ones don't have as much contrast as the strong negatives, and perhaps just give me a few more options in terms of what I might do with them. But if I want something that doesn't have as much contrast, then that's the pile I would be going for. Now, when I was in Manitoba creating these, I used the same 4 tubes of color the whole way through. So I'm not really worried about sorting these into color schemes. They're all compatible with each other at this point. So those are the botanicals, nicely sorted. Then I went through the other piles of prints and pulled out the ones that I had done that were based on designs with trees, stamps and stencils that I'd created. There's a video about that. And also the ones inspired by rocks, so with the texture behind them and with charcoal transfers in the front. I think this one of those is my favorite. So getting these together again in piles. These are the ones that were inspired by tree lines. And I printed up a bunch of those. And again, I'll be using those in different ways, but I put them all together. And then there's these sheets. These sheets were done, they were inspired by forests. These were done with a glue gun and a toilet paper roll, and then just rolled up. And again, I have a video about tool making. I'll link that one in the description. And so I need these all together as well. So first step completed, sort and organize. When you're working on a project this size, this one being 10 by 10, and this one being 9 by 12, it's really hard to envision what your papers are going to look like when you start out with something this size. So I often find that it's best to look for pieces within those papers that are around the right size to fit onto some of these. Sometimes it could just be a matter of doing a little bit of trimming. These pieces themselves are kind of interesting, but there's a lot of extra paper around them. And sometimes that can actually be difficult to deal with when you're trying to lay out a design on your board or your canvas. So what I'll often do is I'll just have a day where, maybe I'll go through and trim these up. And I've got a cutting mat here to protect my surface. And I've got a ruler. Doesn't have to be a steel one, but just any kind of ruler. And a good sharp X-Acto knife. If you have a dull X-Acto knife, it's going to tear your paper, so not going to give you a clean cut. If you prefer it, you could also just tear using the ruler. I'm not too worried about squaring things up yet because I have no idea what angle these are going to go on to anyway. But this is just a little bit of prep. I have at the moment a huge variety of these papers that I've brought back with me from our fishing trip to northern Manitoba. So I've got a lot of trimming to do. There we are. That would be easier to place and look at than one with a lot of edges all over the place. The other thing that I will do, if I've got a tissue like this one to me suggests some of the rock formations in northern Manitoba, and it's a combination of a gel print and a charcoal transfer onto the gel print and then lifted. And I'm going to be posting a video about how I do that on this channel. But I know that I'm not going to want the whole piece on here. I'm just looking for chunks of it to support the vegetation. So I've cut out some of these masks. I've just cut them on my Cricut cutter, but hey, you could do it with a craft knife if your hands are reasonably in good shape. Mine are a bit arthritic. And right now these are kind of close to the sizes that I might need for a 10 by 10 or 9 by 12 type piece. And this allows me to go in as a window and say, ooh, that makes an interesting little piece. And then I can put a pencil around it and then cut it out. And there's other areas in here. Some of them are stronger and they have more black in them from the charcoal. Ooh, there's a little piece right over there that's quite interesting. So I would expect to get several little chunks out of one print this size. Now that I've cut those out, I can admire each one in its uniqueness. And of course, it doesn't have to go the way that I originally drew it or printed it. It could go in a wide variety of orientations. I love the look of these ones. They're suggestive. There's less there. And of course, there's still lots of that piece of tissue left. I'll hang on to it. I'll probably cut more strips and blocks out of it as well. And now when I go to start my collage and I'm thinking, oh, I'd like this shape here and something really dark and intense down in the corner or wherever it happens to be, I've got shapes now that I can push around and work with. I can overlap them with other shapes that I cut out of other tissues. And then finally I can put this whole thing together. But cutting it up is the first step. And it used to absolutely terrify me. I'd start with a tissue this size or a different kind of a collage paper this size, and I'd go, oh, but what if I need this piece here and I don't have it anymore? And they were just each a little precious. And the solution to that one is just to print a whole lot more collage paper until you have so much that you know that each individual piece is not precious and you can cut it up. So here's the result of my trimming and cutting into smaller shapes. So from a variety of larger tissues, which were really way too large to go on a 10 by 10 substrate, I've now got piles of the little rock tissues, the ones that I made from stencils and stamps, the trees. I've got the skylines, and I have strips of the forest ones that I made with the toilet paper roll. So these are all manageable now. Now I can actually envision myself starting to pull materials from these little piles and putting them onto the substrate. So that's the next step. So once I have all of the sorting, organization, trimming things into manageable pieces, once I feel like that's done, it's great. It's like a warm-up exercise. And now I'm starting to see the possibilities of what I want to do. So I'm just going to go through my particular process in terms of tissues and order and all that, and maybe that will help you as well. So the first thing I like to do for something that's this size is start with a few strong positives and see if there's one of them here that really just strikes my fancy. And that's going to be just really a question of what tickles me on a particular day. And I think it's good to know that something that you don't select today might be exactly what you need tomorrow. But I'm looking for something that just reminds me of what it was like when I was there in Manitoba doing these prints, when I had these plants available to me. And I kind of think this one might be a good one to use. It's fairly strong, there's a good contrast. It's not so dark that I'll have trouble creating some depth with it. But I think it kind of looks rather interesting. So I think I'll start with this one. And now I'd like to find some things to put underneath it. And to me, this is the biggest advantage of using the tissue paper. I know the tissue paper is going to get more transparent when I apply the medium and stick it down. So I know that the things that are underneath are going to show through. So I'm thinking of using one of these strips in the background, and which part of it I use might depend a little bit. I'm thinking I'd like a little bit of the dark down here, and then coming up through the warm stuff and then off the top, and there'll probably be a little edge over here that folds over. So now if I want to see what that would do before I commit to anything, I can put it underneath this tissue, and although it's more faint than it would be when I actually stick it down, I can just see how the shapes interact with this. And I'm kind of liking that. I'm kind of thinking that this is a nice strong vertical piece that will help the other bits of this plant climb up. Now, in addition to that, I'm also thinking that I would like something wooded, and this color might work for me. I'm not going to use all of it. I think that would be a little bit too big and overwhelming. But if I were to bring it down here a little bit, so, you know, this would maybe overlap that a bit. And again, you can push these things around. At this point, nothing is committed. So it's really nice. You can kind of push them around, put your big tissue back over top and go, yeah, this might work, you know. So that might be a possibility. Now, this width and this width to me are a little bit too similar, so I might bring this one down a little further. And again, all of these things are things you can just play with. You can just look at it, say this is working for the composition I'm putting together, this isn't working. And I would love to bring some of the rock material into play as well. And I have a variety of small shapes that could work. Maybe like a little bookmark in here somewhere, or maybe not. And again, just try it underneath and see if it works for you. And I've also got these shapes here. These are just circles that I cut out at one point. Some of them have been printed on. So if I was thinking I wanted a dark circle somewhere, I could put that underneath and see how it looked. Or a dark semicircle. Or if I wanted to interrupt one of these pieces, I could put a light circle. Now I've got an interrupted shape over here, and maybe that's going to provide a nice little focal point. So this is a lot of the process. Moving tissues around, trying them out, and layering them up. And then once I kind of got a feeling that a certain configuration might work well, then I'm probably going to look for a light negative, or light positive print, to basically put in there and add another level of depth. So I've got the layers in the background, I've got this layer, and then I would have my darkest layer on the top. And I just have to look at those and decide, okay, does this still work with the two layers? Do I need to move that circle? Do I have some interesting shapes that I can paint into back in here? Is there anything else that I want to add? And once I feel fairly comfortable that I've got these layers sorted out, then I will go ahead and stick them down. So that's how I get started. And once I'm at this stage, once I'm starting to push things around, look at them on the surface that I'm creating, you know, kind of deciding what goes where. Then the juices have started to flow. And now I can say to myself, okay, I'm good now. I can start to live with this for a few days. I can see where things need to be. I can decide whether I want a circle over there or I just like it the way it is. And you know, I can always paint in, I will be painting into it down the road. So I can always make changes after I've started to apply the tissues as well. As I get into this process and actually started sticking things down and adding paint, I'll post a video on that as well, so you can see how this turns out in the end. I think why this approach works for me is because of its hands-on nature. Physically sorting and organizing the prints and papers, trimming excess off, and cutting smaller, more manageable pieces out of those great big sheets. Then I find it easier to pull a few pieces out that resonate with me and start arranging them on my canvas or panel. Give it a try and let me know how you make out in the comments section.